The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
The reason I really like this story is that I spoke to the people involved in the story. So I didn't read it in a book. I didn't hear it from someone who heard it from someone. I spoke to the people involved in the story, and I think it's incredible. On Shavuot, I'm walking to shul, and a Mr. Bitesh comes over to me, Mr. David Bitesh. He comes over to me and says, Rabbi, I have to tell you a story. And let me tell you how it works as a rabbi. 98% of people that have to tell you a story are telling you a story that's interesting to them and completely not interesting to anybody else. But I thought this story was incredible. I said, what's the story, David? He says, here's the story. He says, 3 weeks ago, my mother, who I think is in her 80s, tripped on the street and she fell on her face. She fell on the ground and she was gushing blood. Bleeding on her head, was cut open and she was gushing blood. She was on her face for 15 minutes, Mrs. Bitesh, and she couldn't get up, and she was scared to get up. She was afraid. Until a man passed by, a rabbi in the community. His name was Rabbi Yaakov Rafu. Rabbi Yaakov Rafu walked by, sees the woman on the ground. He bends down and he calls Hatzalah and pretty much saves the lady. Hatzalah takes her to the hospital. She gets 150 stitches, and then for an older woman, that's a lot of stitches. And then she comes back and she's Baruch Hashem, she's okay. That Friday afternoon, this woman, Mrs. Bitesh, sends a bouquet of flowers to Rabbi Yaakov Raful to thank him for basically saving her life. Good. 2 days later, Chacham Yosef Raful's wife, Mrs. Carol Raful, shows up at Mrs. Bitesh's house. She knocks on the door, Mrs. Bitesh opens the door, and there's Mrs. Carol Raful. She says, what are you doing here? She said, Mrs. Raful says, I came to give you a gift. Give me a gift? Your son saved my life. What do you mean, give me a gift? She said, I came to give you a book. She gave her a gift. I came to give you a gift. She says, why? She says, I'll tell you why. She says, 50 years ago, I was expecting and I was due on Yom Kippur, or around Yom Kippur. And in the afternoon, I sent my husband back to shul, and Chacham Yosef back then was in Sharet Zion. And all of a sudden, I went into labor, and I didn't know what to do. She says, no cell phones and no anything. She says, I walked outside of my house, she tells Mrs. Bitesh, and I see you and your son walking down the street. And I tell you what's happening. You sent your son, a bunch of blocks away, to go to Sharet Zion, to go get Chacham Yosef. He came on Yom Kippur in a police car, and he picked me up, and we went together to the hospital. You helped me on that day have a baby. And the baby that I had is the person who picked you up off of the streets. How great is that story? That's not the best story ever? It's unbelievable. I said, no, it can't even be true. Like, I can't believe that story is it's even real. I was like, 1 second, Mr. Bitesh, tell me the story again. And then I bumped into Rabbi Yaakov Raful 2 days ago. He told me the whole story again. Isn't it unbelievable? You throw your bread on the water, and you never know when it comes back.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org